What happens if banks freeze withdrawals? Chapter 1. The day your money stops being yours. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and checking your banking app. Your salary is there. Your savings are there. Everything looks completely normal. But when you try to transfer money, the transaction fails. You try again, assuming it's just a glitch. Still nothing. You head to the ATM expecting a temporary outage. Instead, you find a queue already forming. People are staring at their phones, refreshing banking apps, quietly talking among themselves. The machine displays a simple message: withdrawals temporarily unavailable. At first, nobody panics. Banks have technical issues all the time. Most people assume it'll be fixed within an hour or two. But by lunchtime, card payments start failing in some stores. ATMs begin running dry. Rumors start spreading online. And all of a sudden, millions of people are confronted with a reality they'd never really considered before. The money in your account isn't much use if you can't actually get to it. Today, we're looking at one of the most unsettling financial scenarios imaginable. What happens when banks freeze withdrawals? Because as dramatic as it sounds, this isn't just the plot of some dystopian thriller. It's happened before, and under the right conditions, it could happen again. Chapter 2. The illusion of security. Most people picture their money sitting safely inside a vault somewhere, waiting patiently until they decide to spend it. It's a reassuring image. The problem is, that's not really how modern banking works. When you deposit money into a bank, the bank doesn't simply lock it away for safekeeping. It lends some of it out, invests some of it, and uses it to support a much larger network of financial activity. The entire system is built around one very important assumption: not everyone will want their money back at the same time. And normally, that's perfectly fine. People get paid, pay their bills, buy groceries, go on holiday, and generally carry on with life without giving the banking system a second thought. It all feels incredibly stable. But underneath that stability is something that's actually more fragile than most people realize. The real foundation of banking isn't cash, it isn't gold, it isn't even technology. When you strip everything else away, it's confidence, the belief that your money will be there when you need it. And once that confidence starts to crack, even slightly, everything else becomes a lot more vulnerable. Chapter 3. How panic starts. Now imagine a major bank reports unexpected losses. Nothing catastrophic. Nothing that immediately suggests disaster, but enough to attract attention. Financial commentators start discussing risks. Social media begins circulating rumors. Suddenly, people who never think about banking are asking themselves the same question: should I be worried? The bank responds with reassuring statements. Politicians tell the public everything is under control. Experts appear on television explaining why there's no reason to panic. Oddly enough, this is often the moment people start feeling even more uneasy. So why does reassurance sometimes make people more nervous? Because once the public starts questioning a bank's stability, every statement becomes part of the story. People begin thinking, if everything is completely normal, why does everyone keep insisting it's normal? A few customers move their money elsewhere, just to be safe. Then a few thousand do the same. Before long, millions are watching withdrawal numbers rise. What started as concern begins gathering momentum. And momentum, in situations like this, can become something far more dangerous. Chapter 4. The bank run. A bank run isn't really about money. At its core, it's about psychology. The first people withdraw their funds because they're worried. The next group withdraws because they see other people doing it. Eventually, People start taking money out simply because they're afraid of being the last ones left behind. At that point, logic starts taking a back seat. Whether the bank is actually healthy becomes almost irrelevant. What matters is what everyone believes everyone else is about to do. Confidence, which normally holds the system together, suddenly starts working in the opposite direction. From the bank's perspective, money is leaving faster than it can realistically be replaced. Every hour brings more withdrawal requests, more transfers, and more pressure. What began as a manageable concern starts moving faster than regulators, executives, or governments would like. And sooner or later, a decision may be made that changes everything. Chapter 5. The Freeze. The announcement arrives with very little warning. Withdrawal limits are being introduced. Maybe customers can only access £100 or £200 a day. Large transfers are suspended. Certain transactions require additional approval. Officials insist the measures are temporary and necessary to maintain stability. But from the perspective of ordinary people, that's not how it feels at all. Your balance is still sitting there on the screen. The money technically belongs to you. Yet suddenly, you can't freely access it whenever you want. Think about how quickly everyday life starts changing. Rent payments become uncertain. Businesses struggle to make payroll. Suppliers delay deliveries because they're unsure when they'll be paid. Families start holding on to every bit of cash they can find. People who haven't carried physical money in years suddenly want as much of it as possible. And that's where things become really interesting. The restriction itself is only part of the problem. The bigger issue is what happens inside people's heads. The moment access becomes limited, people stop focusing on what's happening today and start worrying about what might happen tomorrow. Chapter 6. When history repeats itself. As extreme as this scenario sounds, it's not purely hypothetical. Versions of it have already happened in the real world. In 2013, Cyprus introduced strict controls on banking activity during a financial crisis. Withdrawals were limited, transfers were restricted, and many people suddenly found themselves unable to freely access their own money. Something similar happened during the Greek debt crisis. Long queues formed outside cash machines as people rushed to withdraw cash before restrictions became even tighter. For many citizens, having money in the bank no longer guaranteed they could actually use it. What's striking is that these events didn't happen decades ago in a completely different era. They happened in the modern digital age, surrounded by smartphones, online banking, and sophisticated financial systems. All the technology in the world didn't prevent the problem because technology was never really the problem to begin with. The lesson here isn't that every country is on the verge of a banking crisis. That's not the point. The lesson is that when financial systems come under enough pressure, governments and regulators are willing to take extraordinary measures if they believe it will prevent something even worse from happening. Chapter 7. The Hidden Damage. Most people assume the biggest problem would be the inability to withdraw cash. That's certainly the most visible part of the crisis, but in reality, it's only the beginning. The deeper damage comes from something much harder to measure, the loss of trust that starts spreading throughout the economy. Every single day, millions of invisible agreements keep society functioning. Employees trust they'll be paid at the end of the month. Businesses trust customers can buy their products. Suppliers trust invoices will eventually be settled. Banks trust other banks. Almost everything around us depends on these assumptions holding true. Once uncertainty enters the system, behavior starts changing surprisingly quickly. Businesses delay investment plans. Consumers put off major purchases. Companies become more cautious about hiring. Everyone starts waiting for clarity before making decisions. The problem is that when enough people start waiting at the same time, economic activity begins to slow down. A problem that started inside the banking sector gradually spreads outward, affecting shops, employers, manufacturers, and ordinary households that had nothing to do with the original crisis. Chapter 8: The Cashless Trap. What makes this scenario especially unsettling is how dependent modern life has become on digital payments. Many people rarely carry cash anymore. Salaries, savings, investments, subscriptions, and everyday spending all exist inside electronic systems that most of us barely think about. Under normal circumstances, that convenience feels amazing. Payments happen instantly. Money moves with a few taps on a screen. Most people can't imagine going back to cash, but during a crisis, convenience can suddenly turn into dependence. If access is interrupted, even temporarily, a lot of people discover they don't really have a backup plan. Food still needs to be bought, fuel still needs to go into the car, bills continue arriving. Life doesn't stop simply because the banking system is under pressure. And that's why even rumors of banking instability can trigger such powerful reactions. People aren't just trying to protect their money. What they're really trying to protect is access to normal life. Chapter 9: 3 days later. Now imagine our scenario has continued for several days. News channels are providing round-the-clock coverage. ATM queues stretch around city blocks. Social media is flooded with rumors, conflicting information, and people confidently making predictions that nobody can actually verify. Some people insist the crisis is nearly over. Others are convinced the worst is still ahead. Businesses start preferring cash payments. Markets remain volatile. And almost every conversation eventually circles back to the same question: when will things go back to normal? The longer uncertainty lingers, the more damage it causes. Not necessarily because the financial system is collapsing, but because people start behaving as though collapse is inevitable. Decisions become driven by fear rather than confidence. And sometimes, perception becomes reality. That's the strange power confidence holds over financial systems. It can help keep entire economies stable. But when confidence disappears, it can accelerate problems that might otherwise have remained manageable. Chapter 10: The Real Lesson. The most frightening aspect of frozen withdrawals isn't the shortage of cash. It's the realization that modern society depends on systems most of us barely think about. Every day we assume our cards will work, our salaries will arrive on time, and our savings will remain accessible whenever we need them. Trust feels invisible because most of the time it is. It quietly operates in the background while we get on with our lives. We only notice it when something goes wrong. And when it disappears, even briefly, we suddenly realize just how much of our world was built on assumptions we never questioned. The reality is that most people will never experience a banking freeze. Most financial systems will never reach that point. But that's not really the lesson hidden inside this story. The real lesson is understanding how fragile confidence can be, because confidence is the invisible infrastructure behind the entire financial system. Unlike roads, bridges, or power stations, you can't see it. Yet almost everything depends on it. Final thought. The next time you open your banking app, take a second to think about what you're actually looking at. The number displayed on the screen isn't what keeps the system alive. Trust does. Trust that banks will open tomorrow. Trust that payments will clear. Trust that employers will pay salaries. Trust that everyone else still believes the system works. Because once enough people stop believing, things can change remarkably fast. History has shown that under enough pressure, extraordinary measures can become possible. Measures that most people assume could never happen where they live. And that's really the unsettling part. This scenario doesn't require a war. It doesn't require the collapse of civilization. It doesn't require some Hollywood-style apocalypse. Sometimes all it takes is a loss of confidence. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the Collapse Files for more deep dives into the hidden systems that keep modern society running. Because the systems we understand the least are often the ones we depend on the most. And sometimes they're a lot more fragile than they appear.